So I took off, went down to Coney, Mississippi. And while down there, as I tried to get out of school, or about the time, I went to see Sanville Johnson, Biolacombe Choctaw, him and his wife. I went to see both of them. They were the last speakers. Sanville was the last fluent speaker of the Biolacombe Choctaw that David I. Bushnell wrote about around 1910. And I remember Sanville. He was like a real nice man. Last one of the speakers. It's sad to see all that happen going. I could speak Choctaw then. I talked to Sanville in his own language. I really enjoyed talking. Jensen Williams lived with us, too. He's a full-blood Choctaw. And Hubert Wesley, he lived up not too far from where we lived. And he would come down, too. It was always Choctaw conversation. And I enjoyed it. And it was real good to talk to him. Well, I knew Cameron West. He lived at Meshulaville, Mississippi. He was the last Native American east of the Mississippi to stand trial for murder. And this was in 1940 or 41. I had to get my information from other Choctaws, from his son, and from newspaper clippings in Macon. I done a story. First story I done in Wild South, or Wild Alabama magazine, was the last trial east of Mississippi, Cameron Wesley. I knew Cameron real well. I get it back on him later by Irvin M. Pittsman doing a story on him. And I remember going down to Coney. I remember beating Simpson Tubby on 4 or 5 occasions. Fine feller, distinguished old gentleman. He was interviewed by Dr. John R. Swanton of Smithsonian Institute in the early 1900s. Simpson Tubby was a lawyer, a Methodist preacher, and an ex-drunk. And that's the story of the ex-drunk, what made him somebody. He was a school teacher. He taught Choctaw school. A very brilliant man. If he would have stayed playing the stickball, drinking and a betting on everything. There was a white male man, if I understand correct, that picked Simpson Tubby up and told him about his life. He needed to do this, come to church. Naturally, Simpson, like he was drunk, he wouldn't go. But he did show up in church the following Sunday, and he straightened his life out. Firewater is the worst thing an enemy, or you might say an enemy to American Indian, is firewater. Whiskey, rum, any strong drink. And many of my friends from Mississippi today in the grave on account of that. Drinking, had car wrecks, killings, and everything. I know a Choctaw best friend I ever had in my life, Peter Jensen Williams. I honor his memory. He was studying to be a medicine man. He knew a lot about medicine. He taught me a great deal about the Yakani Mapo, Nani Sinti, and things like that, and Alikchis, and he spoke of the Alikchi. He spoke of many old Alikchi he had known. Me and him was about the same age, about a month or 2, 3 difference in it. And he telling me a lot of things that I was teaching him things. We was doing real good. But he went back home, and he got married. He married Barry Shoemake. His first son was named Elvis. Elvis got killed in a car wreck. Mary died, Jensen died. Peter Jensen, we call him Jensen. I knew his daddy, his mother. I knew his grandmother, knew his granddaddy. Old Jonas was his granddaddy. Maggie was his grandmother. Nellie Solomon, her maiden name was Solomon, Willie Solomon's daughter. And he was a leader of that group of Indians that lived in there at one time, representing them. And I remember Rabbit, that was his Jensen's father. They called him Chokefee, Rabbit, real name Rufus Williams. I remember him, I remember his brother, I remember Tony, I remember his sister married Bite Williamson. And Bite was a leader, a tradition leader. He was a drummer. He could sing the old songs, and his wife couldn't speak a word of English. And I went to see her in 1996 before she died. And I went in, I said, let's do it Choctaw way, Lamar. Let's send Hubert Shoemake in there. Go in and see if it's all right, Hubert. Same old way like we used to. All right, come in. They all fixed up nice and cleaned up, you know. I told Lamar, I said, when he comes back here, he'll come to the door, hold the screen, do this. And he came, and that's just what happened right after I got through saying it. And so we went in, and I talked to Mike's wife, and she hugged my neck in Choctaw. She didn't want to speak English. She still wore the old-time red socks. She liked to wear red socks, and with a shoe with a buckle on it. Sometimes they wore them laced up too, and had the old-time dress and a bandana over her head. And she was so old, her eyes done faded, and she was real old. And we got ready to go. She wanted to hug my neck again. I have ate at her house and Bike, when Bike was living, many, many times years ago. And I had knew an old Choctaw named Kane. Kane made the toa, the ball. He knew how to weave a ball, real good stuff with deer hair. And I seen the ball he made, but he taught it to many more Choctaws. Rabbit and the Shoemakes, they made a lot of old-time stickball sticks. They still do, well known for it. You got a pair they made and everything.
Sam, let me get you to go back and talk about how knowing Choctaw people and the culture and language got you hooked up with Irvin Pithman.
Oh, Irvin Pithman, how I got hooked up. He was he had went down before, and they would not talk to him. And somebody told him, a Choctaw, said, call Sam Curren, Bobby they called me then, write him a letter, and gave him my address. It was Hubert Shoemake, or one of them, and Jensen Williams gave the address, and I got a letter through the mail. He said, I pick you up, and he explained who he was, working on a report about the Mississippi Choctaws. And I answered him back, and I told him I will be at home during this week and come on home. Then come on and I'll go with him down there. But he wrote me back when he'll be there, about what time, and he was on time too, all the way from Illinois. He taught at the University of Southern Illinois, and he studied archaeology. Remarkable band at his writings. He had done Unconquered Seminole, Broken Pipes, and the Cherokees he wrote about. Another one, I think, on the Seminoles. He had done a lot of writing up from Canada, the northwest part, the old Northwest Territory, Winnebago, Potawatomi, Stockbridge, Miami, and all the other Indian tribes, Nobjewal. And I remember, so we went down to Mississippi. I was his interpreting guy. They talked to him when they seen me. They sat there and just talked and opened up. Pittman said, I wish I had you here the first time, but I didn't know. And I said, well, and then you get ready to come back here, just let me know and I'll be ready to come, because I'm not tied up. I'm not tied up with nothing. I'm a free person. And we left and we went to Coneyhattan and we went to Meshulaville where Cameron Wesley lived. I think he lived at the old Monroe Lee place. And we went over to the Choctaw. That's the creek where the rabbit died, Dancing Rabbit Creek. Cemetery there today. Cameron's buried right by the marker of the Dancing Rabbit Creek, his granite marker. So we went, we head toward Mayhew Junction. We just happened to be there, and Pithman and I went out into the woods where it was located, found old brick bats, some flat rock, and a piece of old iron laying around. And that was the old Choctaw Mission, Mayhew Mission. I caught the bus to Columbus, to Macon, and then to Columbus, and on home. It didn't take long to get from Columbus back to where I got my taxi back home, and that was a good memory trip. We had a good time, got acquainted, and we corresponded through the mail for many years till Pithman died. I got the last letter somewhere about 1975, and when he died, or 76, he stated in that letter, Irvin Pithman, that I flew over your house on the way to visit the Seminoles in Florida. When Pithman wrote the Choctaw Report, that was the first book somebody ever really got out and wrote about what the United States government done and the Choctaw people, or done any other people, Indian people. He got down to it. And I knew where to get the information. I knew it when I told him, but I'll let the Indians tell it about their granddaddies and their family, how they were murdered for their allotment land, had the right to stay behind, not go to Oklahoma. But they did. Those that got their parents murdered, they pitched in with other Indians that had land, or either lived as squatters on their own land. They had to live as squatters now on their own land that was stolen from them by the whites of Mississippi, who demanded it to be done. They wanted that land. And they took the poorest land they could get, just stay at home in their homeland. And when the other Choctaw got ready to leave, to go into Oklahoma, one group ran at Jena, Louisiana. They went to the plantation of this Frenchman married a Choctaw woman. And the Frenchman gave them that land to live there, and his wife and his kids can live there with him. And it didn't do nothing but enrich the bloodline of the Jena people, Choctaw. And 30 miles from there is another group of them called the Clayton Choctaw. The Jena and the Clayton didn't know each other existed all that time. The Clayton came in earlier, and then further to the west you got the other Choctaw Apache, Lipan Apache, that was held as slaves by the Spaniards around Natchitoches. And then in the southern part of Louisiana, you got the Bayou-Lacombe Choctaw, and on the Pearl River near the coast, you got the White Oak Choctaw. You got Choctaws all over Louisiana. You got them in Alabama, Mowa. Well, there's a difference in native people and Europeans. European men like to get in a barber shop and tell corny jokes, talk about football, and tell a joke, go, ha, 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 a forced life. You don't hear that around Indian people. I never have heard it. And it's just boring to go into a barber shop hearing about football and politics. Indians don't worry about politics, football. Sit there and begin the forced laugh out like it's real funny, putting on a little act. I quit going in there and cut my own damn hair. I don't go into them no more. Nobody in there, it's all right. My barber told me, I won't call his name because it might get out on the air one day. He said, I get tired of hearing that stuff all day long. I don't blame you, Mr. Curren. He gets tired of it. I said, it gets a good life out of it. We'll make a joke with it, make it good. He said, you won't do. And that's the one thing different between a Native American and them. American Indian, I don't care who he is, he be in town. You get him away from that lifestyle, he's all right, that city lifestyle, he'll melt back in. And you can take the African today and carry him to the jungles of Africa. He gonna be laughing, joking with somebody won't be long in his native land, just like an American Indian. I seen one time, he's same degree of blood I got, but he just popped out so strong in him. He looked like a full blood. That's the way the gene pool runs. He allowed to have a brother or sister, blonde-headed, blue-eyed. But Choctaw said, look, full blood, look, walking down the road. They thought he was. He ain't full blood. We same generation. I explained it to him how to go around the world. And he's a cousin of mine. And there's a lot of difference in them. They're trustworthy then. They're very trustworthy, the Indian people. He tell you you're going to do something, he would. I knew one Choctaw in my whole life that went out to the white world. And I won't call his name, but he wanted to be white. He was ashamed of being a Choctaw. I never did like him for that. I quit having anything to do with him. He was a prominent family, Choctaw. He married three or four white women. 1, 2, 3, 4 white women. Never married Choctaw. His family said, I'd marry your Choctaw woman. You ain't gonna ever make it out there in the world, because he likes to drink and raise cane. And I remember him. He's a good man, don't get me wrong, a fine, good friend. But he got where he just wasn't acting right or something. He done went to his head, civilized. I call it the savage white world, savage American system, the evil American system. That's the way I call it. Century of dishonor they created. And then I met other Choctaws, humble, couldn't hardly speak English, men and women. Women that couldn't speak English. Didn't even want to learn it, and happy among themselves. I told them one time, to hell with the English language, hell with Christianity, live your own way. Go back to the old way. If the Russians ever offer you guns, fight with them. Because these people would take you could fight with them, they'll take everything you have away from you. They done it before when y'all fought against the Creek and the Seminole. And they did. As allies of the Americans. You never trust them, none of them. I would tell them that. I meant to. I was about to militant this man. One man told me, he's a Bob Ferguson in Mississippi, said, I heard of you, Mr. Curren, I admire you. Said, you have made a wonderful Adolf Hitler. Just said you knew how to rouse them up. Adolf Hitler, a Castro or a Lenin or a Stalin or something among them. I said, at least I tell it like it was. And I remember telling him to always remember who you are. You are a Choctaw first. I even told him if the Army drafts you, don't go. Let them come here. We have the news made to make a hero out of you. That was some of my philosophy back in them days. Now, if it came up, if they drafted him, I'd tell you to go on, but refuse to fight. Be a conscientious objector. I said, that's the best way to get by it. You get paid while you work. And the other thing about the Indian people, they love to hunt, they love to fish, they like to roam. And they will work. They ain't lazy, but they like a job they can do, and somebody to treat them right, they would work. And they like to work. And a job decent and respectable, not something that some black guy refused to take in Mississippi. I said, a black man won't take it, but a Choctaw will take it. I said, how many blacks will leave here now and go to the Delta in an old pickup truck, it raining on them, and pick cotton till the cotton's picked in the Delta on the Mississippi River, and drive right back by where Malmaison was, Greenwood LaFleur, chief of the Choctaw, where he lived. I always admired him. I'm some kin to the LaFleurs. The LaFleur, there was one had drowned. I believe that's a Tanapishkatini Creek. And then Basil left and went to Oklahoma. He became the chief after he got to Oklahoma, Basil LaFleur. According to Cushman, Basil was eating at the table and fell dead, died at the table eating. They say he was a good moral man. But it makes me mad when the Choctaw talk bad about Greenwood LaFleur. Sure, he signed that treaty, a Dancing Rabbit Creek, because after Jackson's General Coffee said, if you don't sign this treaty when I go back to Washington, we're coming back, you're going to meet the full forces of the United States Army. You'll wish you had signed it. Scared the Choctaw. Greenwood LaFleur was half French. He was very wise. Being French, he could outsmart the Americans with his brilliance and Indian cunning way. He said, can you put this amendment in here? Any Choctaw who wants to remain behind can do so and leave, get 640 acres of land. Very few got it. Some got 320, some got 160. And each child was to get 160, and each adult, to get 320 acres of land here in Mississippi. Very few got it, and Greenwood LaFleur put in that he'd get about 7, 8 sections of land, because he was the chief, and he's not in the Choctaw, but he said any Choctaw who wishes to remain east of the Mississippi can do so. And they did. A lot of them remained. The government kept trying to get them out of Mississippi, get them out. And a lot of them left. The old Choctaw, the last removal was in 1903. The government's still trying to get them out, entice them to leave Mississippi, make more room for Whitey. So they left by train the last removal. Well, they didn't have money to get back home when they got to Oklahoma. It wasn't the great promised land they thought it was. I knew old Willie Solomon's more in Mississippi. They started walking down the railroad track. These other Choctaws come up. They asked them, are you Choctaw? Yeah, and they spoke Choctaw, and they walked all the way from Choctaw Nation through Arkansas, got somewhere into Louisiana, and they shook hands. They didn't want to part, Louisiana and Mississippi Choctaw. They stood there talking, looked sad in their eye. They took down address, had one could read and write, and another Choctaw went to Catholic school. He could read and write some. They memorized each other's name as friends. And as a friendship came up, I heard it. We kept up with them a long time ago. This is old Choctaw telling me. We kept up with our brothers in Louisiana a long time, and we still do hear from them. And I was in 1950-something, I was in Coney-Hatta. I met 3 Louisiana Choctaws. And that Willie Solomon's community was in Coney-Hatta. And they were there. They were running with other Choctaw. Their skin wasn't as dark. They were full blood. Their skin wasn't as dark, but there was a yellowish-looking color to them. They had pretty skin. And I was glad to see them. I had to get out and shake hands with them, too. I really enjoyed it.